Good evening to everyone joining us this evening, and thank you for being here. We welcome you to the fourth in our film series presented in conjunction with the Indian Heritage Centre's recently launched special exhibition, Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. This exhibition has been co-created with the Sikh community and focuses on the history and culture of Singapore's Sikhs. This monthly series presents short films made by Sikhs around the world and in Singapore. Through a range of subjects from history and culture to identity and life in the diaspora, the films encapsulate the diverse experiences of Singapore Sikhs and the diaspora. Today, we will be presenting two films by Singaporean filmmaker Gurjeevan Singh Balrose. And we are again honored to have with us Sarabjit Singh, who's the president of the Young Sikh Association, to introduce the session as well as to act as the moderator and the discussant for the discussion that will follow the screenings. A short introduction to Sarabjit, who currently serves as the president of YSA, or the Young Sikh Association, where he organizes various platforms with his team for the youth in the community. These include the YSA Racial Harmony Football Tournament, YSA Ministerial Dialogues, and the Quantish Lecture Series. Sarabjit was also one of the editors of the SG50 publication, Singapore at 50, 50 Sikhs and Their Contributions, as part of the commemorative projects endorsed by the Ministry for Culture, Community and Youth. In 2019, Sarabjit was also shortlisted as a nominee for the Straits Times Singaporean of the Year Award. Sarabjit is truly an ambassador for the Sikh community and is a very well-known face, and we're very happy that he's joining us again today as a moderator for this session. Sarabjit, could I invite you to introduce today's session and our filmmaker of the evening, Gurjeevan Singh, as well? Thank you.
Thanks for that generous introduction, Malvika, and it is indeed my honor to be able to host the session in collaboration with the Indian Heritage Centre and, of course, that special exhibition, Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. And speaking of stories, we are very fortunate and delighted to have two stories that will be shared with us today. So we have two films by Gurjeevan Singh Balrose. Today's first film that is made by Gurjeevan is titled Haruwal. It follows a 62-year-old India-born Singaporean as she visits her late father's home in Punjab, India, for the very first time, and hoping to find closure after a lifetime in Singapore. The filmmaker's mother grew up hearing all about Haruwal, her father's hometown, but she had never been there. He felt she needed to bring closure to this chapter of her life so she could move on to the next. This film explores the nuances of home, belonging, and identity. Gurjeevan Singh Balrose, the filmmaker we're very fortunate to speak with today after the screening of both films. Gurjeevan is a graduate of LaSalle College of the Arts, Singapore. He has produced and directed several films, of which Haruwal and Vichora were nominated at the National Youth Film Awards in July 2020. Vichora, in fact, won the award for the Best Original Score. Haruwal was also selected for screening in Honor SG Season 9 and was screened internationally at the Toronto Real, Asian, and Hong Kong Shorts film festivals. His film Come Here, which we will also get the opportunity to see later today, was nominated for Best Direction, Actor and Actress for Cine 65 2019 Film Festival, and also nominated for Frameworks Film Festival 2019. More about Gurjeevan. Gurjeevan enjoys storytelling as a powerful tool to get people to come together and feel emotions they may not have before. He hopes to create narrative feature films in the years to come, to tell stories in the drama genre, and to share Sikh history and culture in Singapore and India. I'd like to invite Gurjeevan at this point to share briefly with us a little bit about Haruwal before we have the opportunity for the viewing. So Gurjeevan, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Sean, for the kind introduction. So that's a short introduction about Haruwal, like what Sean has mentioned. So Haruwal is basically a journey of my mom's visit to her father's hometown, which she has never visited before. She has visited India a couple of times, but never her father's hometown. So you can lead the way, and then we can chat about it later. Thank you very much. Enjoy the show.
Everyone in my family members have seen my grandfather, but except for me. I really feel sorry that I wasn't there. I was very close to my auntie and my dad. So my dad used to always tell me stories about Haruwal. They were brought up. My auntie used to say that, they used to stay there. And then my dad has this land about 17 acres. We should really go one day to go and see the land in Haruwal. But never, I've been to India a number of times. Each time I go there, my auntie and uncle said, no, we got no time. What is there to see? Nothing. I just, for once, I need to see how Haruwal is, where my father's land. All these years, listening to all the stories and all that from my auntie and my dad and all that, it has been in my mind that I need to go to Haruwal, and my vision is accomplished once I've seen the land. At least I've seen the land. Hearing from people and seeing are two different things.
But Ajipal Mambig came on. So that's how I just
Feel very excited. First time I'm going to see after 63 years. There's a jammu tree. He also told me there's a jammu tree. We brothers, sisters, we stay in this house. Very happy. First time I'm going to just see Haruwal. I'm very, very excited. Oh my God, this is the house. 36.
ਮੈਂ ਤੋਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੈੜੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਈ ਇੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਟਾਫ ਰੋਡ ਤੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ
ਆ ਢਾਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ
ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਲਈ ਨਾ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਆਏ ਮਾਸੀ ਦੀ ਲੜਕੀ ਆ
ਅੱਛਾ
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਮੰਮੀ ਚੰਗਾ
ਓਏ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਟੱਬਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੱਚਾ ਪੜ੍ਹਦਾ ਨੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਜਿਹਾ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਜਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੱਲ ਲਿਆ ਉਹ ਨਿਕਲੇ ਨਾ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪੈਸੇ ਦੇ ਥੋੜੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਲਏ 10,000 ਰੁਪਏ ਚ ਵੇਚਤਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ
ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਕਹਾਣੀ ਹੈ ਯਾਦ ਵੀ ਉਸ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ
ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ
ਕੋਈ
ਇਹ ਆਏ ਧੰਜਲਾ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ
ਓ ਸਿੱਧੇ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਪਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਉਹ ਘਰ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਤੇ ਲਾ
ਉਹ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਤੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਜਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਅੰਬੇ ਆਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ
ਓ ਯਾ
ਉਦੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ
ਓਕੇ ਪਰ ਆ ਸਾਰੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਿਤਾ ਜੀ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲੋਂ
ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਪੈੜੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਪੈੜੀ ਆ
ਸਾਰੀ
ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਰੀ ਪੈੜੀ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੀਵਾਰ ਬਣਿਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਉਰੇ
It's okay. The person maybe must have destroyed the tree. Someone else is staying there, who knows. It's okay. Okay, over here is Haruwal, man. Okay, I think it's okay. No, I'm not jealous. Just like, I mean, I'm not jealous of them. Like, they like to tease me. My siblings will say, you're born in India and then you're not Singaporean and all that. Sometimes it just like triggers me. Initially, I was under denial. But now I tell myself I need to move on in life. But
have you?
Because I heard they reuse some places they use reuse one. That's what I'm worried lah. That's why I have to ask you all. I can't stay in India. Definitely I can't stay in India. The lifestyle there is so much different. If the house was there, maybe lah. House gone, land gone. We got no part there, nothing. Sad.
चलिए भाई
चले
बोले
सत श्री अकाल The moment you step your feet there, something like a miracle happens. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel the emotions and vibration. Huh? Every one of my family members have seen my grandfather, but except for me. I really feel sorry that I wasn't there. Life, this is a life cycle, life and death. Nobody is prepared for anything, so we have to move on in life, but it takes time, courage. Mission accomplished. Yeah. I've seen Haruwal, my father's land. Someday when I pass by Haruwal, I go to Punjab, I can proudly say, this used to be my dad's land, but it's not to be.
That was a really wonderful and powerful personal film, personal story shared with us through film. But we do have a second film today, and we are going to have the chance to watch that as well. Today's second film is titled Come Here, and it features Arjun, a young Sikh boy who can't understand Punjabi and struggles to understand his grandmother. Annoyed, she washes his hair for the very first time to teach him a lesson. This is another powerful short story, and the film explores intergenerational change, identity, and childhood. And as promised, we will have a discussion and question and answer session after both of these films. So go ahead and you can start already to leave your questions in the Q&A button on your screens before we watch the second, as we watch even the second film. But I will like to again give Gurjeevan the opportunity to share with us a little bit about Come Here before we enjoy the film. Gurjeevan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sean. So for this film is basically inspired by my very own experience of getting my hair washed for the very first time from my grandmother. So we can discuss a bit later. Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Gurjeevan, and let's get set to watch that second film.
Arjun! Arjun!
हाँ जी माँ जी।
कोली लिया।
किसी आ खाली।
उत्थे। ते दिमाग फिर मैं क्या कोली लिया। कुत्ता क्या तो सिखाया? मैं आप ही करूँगी। कोली भी नहीं पता नहीं कितों सीखा। कोली भी नहीं पता, सब कुछ नहीं पता। खेडी जाओ गेम खेडी जाता। आ कोली सुनिया कि नहीं? अज केस तो नहीं ते मैं तेनू बिठाऊगी चंगी तरह थोगी। अजकल बच्चे ना आखे नहीं लगती। मैं वेखो ये चलता तेन। अर्जुन मैं क्या अंदर चली चली अंदर मैं तो क्या मैं किस तेरे बाल गोडे अक्कल है अयो मैं क्या बस नहीं आगे जा आगे आ जा मैं क्या आगे आ जा बस इतने साबुन पानी पे साबुन पे क्या साबुन पानी क्या शैम्पू नहीं चलता ये शैम्पू नहीं चलता शैम्पू बाल साबुन दे एक मिनट ठहर जा इसमें सारा साबुन बनता है गंदे करना ठहर जा पानी होगा तेरा सारा साबुन सिर पकड़ जुरा पड़ा एक मिनट ठहर जा पानी बहुत मुंह एक मिनट ठहर जा पानी पाऊंगी मुंह से कान भी तोड़ी एक मिनट पानी ले ला ले सब निकल गया पानी पका बस ठीक है और फिर बैठ जा और अपने नाम
Amazing. I mean, both of these films, short films they were, but they left us with so much to think about and most definitely feel as we watch these. Thank you for the opportunity to share and watch these with you, Gurjeevan, and of course now to have this unique opportunity to discuss with you. I just want to perhaps start with some of my initial comments and thoughts and feelings watching these films. Mm-hmm. I think, as I alluded to, they're very short films, but they deal with very complex subject matter in terms of the themes and even some of the tensions you're trying to bring across. I mean, in Haruwal, I think one of those quotes or something that your mom said really struck me as so powerful. She talks about, the tree. I think it was a berry tree that was uprooted, and she shares that it's been uprooted and the tree has been destroyed, but it's okay. Someone else is staying there now and I have moved on in life. I mean, I got this sense, right, that, this tree actually represented a sense of loss, culture, connection with the land. But also it was nice to see that eventually, in the next, very soon after, we see that there is a frame where you are all seen visiting our Harmandir Sahib. So there is still that spiritual connection. So I would like you to share a little bit about that. I mean, in what ways is there still that connection and that sense of loss? But developing on this theme of loss as well, in Come Here, I thought the use of the bowl, right, what it as a metaphor and what it symbolizes is, in fact, a bowl is a container, and a container where there could be some preservation of culture in this instance. But that frustration, the bowl becomes the trigger or that start of that frustration where you don't know what a bowl is, and it's almost a reference almost to the grandchild that, you are missing something, some part of that culture. You aren't able to be that container of culture. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on these very complex themes, how you are able to bring these about, and just share a little bit about, first, of course, the selection of these themes of loss, negotiating identity, but how were you able to then distill these into some of the everyday objects that we deal with? So yeah, share with us a little bit about that, Gurjeevan. And at the same time, I would like to, of course, invite our viewers at home to start sending in your questions and have Gurjeevan respond to those as well. But go ahead, Gurjeevan, in the meantime.
Thank you very much, Sean. So I'll just share for Haruwal first. So regarding to loss, because this is a place that I have never been before, my mother has never been before. So one of my Uncle G and my auntie, they have been there. So I went around to interview all of them and I got information. So but the thing I found out is there's no physical picture that I can prove that is a house. So however, when we went there is all these stories about they all of them, they shared that there's a particular in the house, there's a particular tree, a jammu tree that is right just behind the house. So I had to use that as a source of the figure of point that this is where the house is supposed to be. So as we are heading into the place where we have no clue, but from there we heard stories. This is the place where your father actually plowed the land, and then they showed us this area. And then when we went into the house that is supposedly to be his house, they found out that it's actually destroyed. So the symbolizers of the tree would mean that this is something that was heard and passed down for many years, has heard of that this is what it's supposed to be, but now actually visiting and seeing it in place, and you hear now that it's destroyed. So that would be to symbolize the loss that but you are now able to see the land. So being able to film this for my mom is a different journey, because my mom has been telling me these stories for many years, and now when I got the opportunity to finally bring her there, as you can see, she got really emotional. It's okay, it's not okay. That's the whole point of it. So even though when I'm there asking her, so how do you feeling right now? So she was extremely down, but the very fact that she got to see the land, which was a wonderful experience for her. So that is the theme to cover loss and identity, because being born in India and then living in Singapore for many years and having this identity, like you are Singaporean, you are Indian. So having this discussion with her about her father, where he's from, and she has never seen it. So that particular scene of discussion about the tree being destroyed, so that relates very deep to my mother and myself.
Gurjeevan, I want to push this point a little bit further. So we are able to see that sort of switch with your mom, right? In terms of, there is the Haruwal that she imagined, and then there's a Haruwal that she eventually experienced, right?
Correct.
So, I just want to ask and have you share with us, and, you probably would have had this conversation with your mom as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Haruwal imagined, Haruwal experienced, what was that like for her? But more to the point, was she in search for Haruwal the place or Haruwal the people?
So for this, in the discussion that we had, there isn't a physical something that we can understand to what was it. So after making the whole film, I would say having a discussion with her, Haruwal is more of now understanding where this place is, and it's actually now more around the people rather than the place. So although there's the idea like, this, what if, if this had not happened, this had happened. So that would be a very good idea. But after that, to understand when you're back in Singapore, the discussion about, so Haruwal is like the place. So this is where my father did plow the lands and so on and so forth. So there's this story that now it's a closing of a chapter, something that was heard many years ago. So that was the most deep subject that I think it was understood from my mom and myself.
Thanks for that. So we've got a couple of questions coming in already. We'll take the first one from Sandeep. Sandeep's asked, Jeevan, how do you think your mother's life would have changed if indeed she was able to physically enter her father's home?
Because I think if she would have gone earlier, who knows? There are many different situations that happened. So when we went down to find out the truth of what actually happened about the house, so there was many hearsay back and forth after interviewing many of my family members there. So we found out some stuff that eventually that is this due to negligence of the certain situation because the family is in Singapore and then you're trying to have the situation there. So now understanding it, even though if my mom had to visit there, if she get to see it in place, I think it would change a different version of how it was. Because given that now she envisioned it, but she would prefer to see the house itself. But changing her life, I don't think it would change as much, but it would definitely create a whole better vision of how the house would be.
Thanks for that, Gurjeevan. So we have another question from Upneet. Hi, Upneet. Good to see you here. Another young filmmaker from Singapore. And she has, of course, said, hi, Gurjeevan, good job. Nice job. So both your films encircle personal themes. Is that the route you wish to take in your journey as a filmmaker? Or are there other themes that you are looking to explore and possibly venture into?
Hi, Upneet. Thank you very much for the question. You yourself have done many great films as well. I would say because in the past few years, there aren't any Singaporean Sikh filmmakers. So as of now, I know of Upneet and myself, and then there are others. So my most important questions when I'm making a film, I don't see anybody of like people of like how we are. So the most important question that I want to make is something personal. Because if it's real, someone else can feel it. So that's the first few questions and the films that I'm making. But I have a whole lot more stories that I want to tell. But overall, in the future, I am looking to tell in a story between Singaporean Sikhs and in India, how the journey would be. So I'll be going more historical side, and also in the future, how would it be?
Thanks for that, Gurjeevan. We have another question. Let me just quickly get that out. We have a question from HPB Nim, and she asked, and this is with reference to Come Here. So understandably, Arjun is of a different generation than you were when you experienced that encounter with your grandmother. So was it complicated explaining the process and the themes to him, as his experience is likely very different from yours?
Yeah, so for Come Here, it was actually very interesting. So the idea came about what it actually happened to me from a very young age. So now when I want to create something similar, there aren't any actors out there. So I had to use someone real. So eventually when I asked my aunt to play the role of her mother, and Arjun to play a role of me. So initially it was very difficult to get non-actors to play in a role. But then after some back and forth of understanding what the character is, sharing what actually happened, it was a little bit easier to understand, but to go through the whole process. So for Arjun, given that he's a different generation, he would understand a little bit more of what sort of the experience that I experienced, because the filming part of it, I had to wash his hair like 7 times to go through the process over and over again. So in order for him to make it real for both my aunt and Arjun, is the soap had to really enter into the eyes. So that's the whole portion where you cannot act, you really need to get the feel. So that is very relating to fiction films. So that is one thing I actually enjoy. And then when seeing it on the camera itself in cinema and in the theater itself, it was a brilliant experience. And then the fact that I do not want to explain so many things about, because in the Sikh culture, there's an extra reason why you have to keep the hair and so on and so forth. For the non-Sikhs who are watching and who actually watch in the cinema as well. So I got different experience from them. Some they got, oh, this is a bad grandmother who actually threatens threatens him, and then the other way, which is more of the comedy side, is what actually happened. So this understanding is something I was trying to create. It's neither comedy, it's neither drama, but it's actually both. So that was the emotion and the creation of what I was trying to create of the story as well.
So it's good to have that assurance from you that, actually this is relatively or fairly typical in a Punjabi household, right? Where, but it was interesting as well that what you pointed out, that your nephew had to also physically experience what it was like, to have soap in his eyes and what you encountered. So it was interesting how you decided that he pretty much had to somewhat be able to relate and empathize with you, then to be able to later depict it. But I want to just also further develop this point. Of course, I think, and what Nim also asked, I was just curious to know, and you touched on this, you alluded to it, but perhaps in a more direct way to share with us. Of course, language is one of the things that creates this barrier between generations. And you shared a little bit about, the culture, the religious aspects of it. But were there other things that perhaps, we may have, maybe I wouldn't say missed, but because we were quite our attention is typically captured on, what you're depicting through the use of language. But was there anything else that you were trying to, in fact, share about, where there are these possible divides or a lack of understanding, perhaps, or this inability to connect among generations through, what you have showed us in Come Here?
In general, the subtext what I was trying to create is between, there's a very big difference of the older generation and the new generation, because most of them have came from India and they practice the norms, the cultural routines, and from as the generation goes on, they're not going to follow it because they're going to speak more English, they're not going to speak more of the Punjabi, and they will lose more of the items that was learned and brought from India. So hence is why the bowl and why it was grinding that particular chili so it's more of like, till today my auntie, my grandmother, she's 86, she still would grind that particular way, whereas to people our age, they'll just get a blender and grind it, but there's a different taste to that. So this is all the subtext where I was trying to build on this film, and I cannot explain everything in a very short sequence. So by making it, I would get the audience to hope to understand a little bit better if they want to find out more, and then they can go and search. So that's one good point about having this debate and a discussion, so we can understand more about why the reasons, what are the clips that I place in there.
Thanks for that. I mean, another thing that I wanted to just point out, and before I ask this follow-up question to that, I mean, I would like to invite all our viewers, if you have any other questions you'd like to ask Gurjeevan about both films today, or even some of his future projects. I believe if he's at liberty to share with us, he'd be most happy to do so. But another thing that I took away from watching Come Here is that, we often, when we have these conversations about intergenerational divides, right, our sympathies tend to lie with the seniors or the older folks in the community. But I thought what you had done with Come Here was to actually provide that alternative perspective, and I truly felt a lot of sympathy for Arjun. Why was this something that you were trying to achieve deliberately, where we also are able to therefore see that perspective of a younger person, how they are negotiating this sense of interacting with elders who may perhaps in some way already have formed a judgment, right, about what they are doing with our culture and whatnot. So, I mean, was this an important perspective for you to also depict in Come Here, to have that sort of sympathy with younger folk?
Correct, because the most important part why I wanted to show, like, when I was deciding to make the film, who was the main character? Is it Arjun or is it the grandmother? So both are important factors, but I find Arjun will be a more important factor because to the general public, because I was making it in mind of a non-Sikh, non-Punjabi would able to understand, because they've never seen a young boy with such long hair. So going through this process and growing up, everybody will ask, why you keep your long hair, why you wear a turban, why you do this. So eventually there may always be some bad comments whatsoever, but going through the process. So as a young boy going through the washing his hair, so that's what is the most important factor I want to show on screen. So building that up, that was my motivating factor of building the film.
Thanks, Gurjeevan. So I'm going to go back to Haruwal now, and once again, just extending an invite to all our viewers. If you have any other questions for Gurjeevan, do ask him. But meanwhile, I'm going to go back to Haruwal, and I want to ask you, Gurjeevan. I mean, perhaps I noticed that there are some viewers who are non-Sikh, non-Indian viewers as well. Correct. And could you share with us, try to help us understand as well, what is this strong connection that especially members of the diaspora, I mean, people like you and me included,
Mm.
what is this sense of connection? Try to explain and help us understand, why is it that we feel this sense of connection with land back in India, back in Punjab? And in some instances, such as even your mum, and for the few of us, I believe there's a good number of us who may have actually not even physically visited these places, but we're just hearing about this, yet we find that there is this sense of connection. So just help us understand this a little bit.
So, especially in secondary school, so that's when you're starting to understand more about different cultures, and at the age so you have a little bit more of debate, trying to understand different religions and different cultures. So from then onwards, you find out Singapore is everybody who came is mainly foreigners. So they came from China, they came from Malaysia, they came from India, so on and so forth. So these are the main races that came to Singapore. But then when they are uprooting with their families and different generations, so most of them they don't have a connection to their parents' land. So for me, I was given the opportunity, or I had this opportunity that my grandmother is still close to her family members back there. And at that time, at a young age, when I went to India once, I hated the idea. It's like, oh my God, not everything is smelly, and it's just bad. But it took me a process to appreciate and eventually loving the village life. So having this discussion about where Singaporeans are from, and I realized most of my circle of friends and the people I know, they are not close to their family members back from where they're from. I've a number of Chinese friends. They don't know anybody. They know of family members back in China, but they've never been. And given that I have this ultimate luxury, and compared to all my cousins, I was able to follow my grandmother to visit all her family members. By doing that, I was the very first time, so that allowed me to be exposed to all of them. So for the future films that I've made or I'm going to make as well, it gives me the freedom to go India on my own and explore identity within the theme of what Singapore is and what India would represent for a fellow Singaporean Sikh.
So in that sense, you've had some practice, but I think more importantly, like you shared, you have established some networks and relationships with people there that facilitate some of the work that you're trying to do through film, right?
Correct. That it because of my it's mainly for my grandmother. I had the luxury, so that's why when I speak to all my friends, they don't have most of them, they don't have connections to their grandparents back home. So by making a film like this is to show that they are always Singaporean. It's not where you come from, but your ancestors is actually back from wherever they came from. So I think it's very good important story that wherever you are, you should need to own and learn more about your own culture and your own religion and where they're from. And then understanding that, you're able to move forward even better.
Yeah, thanks. I think we had a agreement from Wee Jiang, who has also said that going back to Shantou in China makes him or her also understand roots better. Appreciate that. So and there was also something that you mentioned and which was top of mind, and I think Nim is actually articulated in a follow-up question. I mean, of course, first of all, I think all of us want to, I think it was very touching. And we also want to commend you, for making that trip with your mom. I think must have been a wonderful experience, sharing that experience with her. But Nim is actually asking a question on that note, which I also had thought of, and thanks Nim for sharing this question. You had the unique experience of not only being the director, but also the son of the protagonist. Was it difficult for you to negotiate these two roles? So share with us, what's your personal takeaway from this journey with your mum? But I think we also noticed that your mum also did have some particular needs when it came to medical attention. So if you can share with us, some of these accounts, how did you negotiate, of course, your role as a director and a son, but at the same time, some of the very real, maybe challenges or issues that came up, which perhaps you didn't anticipate, or just share with us some of these experiences as well.
Yeah, because creating a film like that, I've never done any particular film going to India. This is the very first time. So I was just strongly motivated by the knowing of what Haruwal is. So I just interview all my family members and try to get an idea what Haruwal is, and then I had to bring my mom there. So, and I had the luxury to bring two Singaporean Chinese friends with me along to film the process. So it was initially it was a very daunting task where I was living in the village for 7 days. So I need to manage my mom, and I know it's on the motivating factor of the story when to act, how to control that particular emotion. And also at the same time, I'm introducing my friends about this is India and it's about the Sikh culture and the village. So every now and then, back and forth, I would tell them a little snippet of what life is here and how is it about. And they are eating from meat and chicken whatsoever to eating this Punjabi food on an everyday basis. Eventually, they like it. So there's
So very quickly, that means you actually were playing three roles. One was director, one was son, and one was tour guide.
Yes, correct. So it was a very difficult task, but I wasn't thinking of it at the moment. So after we came back, I had that reflection. But on the moment, I had no time to rest. It's just I had to focus on the story, focus on them, and the most important is focusing on my mom's health. So prior for this, the most important factor was my mom needed to go through dialysis on a every 2 days basis. Two days she needs to go for a session. So this is her first time going to another country during the session. So I had to go online and finding a particular hotel is hospital is like finding a hotel. You read the reviews and you have to call the doctor and have to confirm whether can they handle it and so on and so forth. So that was the most fearful factor for me and also for my mom, knowing
Just a quick clarification. That means you actually made those calls before you set off for the trip. That means while in Singapore. Okay.
Yes, correct. So I had to make the calls before prior 1 week before to confirm, and also it's a bit dodgy of a number, and then speak to them. I'm not sure whether they have to send them files. You're still not sure what is going to happen. So there's this fear whether how is it going to take place. So that was my biggest fear. So if anything happens, touch wood, it would fall on me because I decided to bring my mom here to India.
How old were you again when you made this trip? Sorry, just to refresh our memory.
Oh, is this 2 years ago in 2019?
Wow. Okay.
So having that responsibility, and thank God everything went well. However, there's this one particular bad situation where imagine in the hospital there was a power outage. The power went out. So it was bad for my mom. She has never experienced while doing the dialysis, the power went out and she got worried. Eventually, she became better, but that happened four times. And then the other factor is out of the four, I happened to be in the lift for one of them, and then the lift was being stuck. Because I was generally I'm very calm, so it helped me in that process that I just don't panic. I know after a while it would be fine. But if I told my mom about this, she would freak the hell out, because she'll be claustrophobic and she don't know what to do. So that's why the whole health situation of finding a hospital, which is the most daunting task that I had to do, I had to deal with, because if anything were to happen, it would fall on me. So that was the biggest risk that I had to take. And I was strongly motivated on the fact for the story where I want her to have the emotion that to find something that what she's trying to look for. So that was my motivating factor to bring the story around and had to bring her there, and at the same time sharing information about the Sikh culture and bringing them to Golden Temple. They've never seen something like that. They are instantly the eyes on them because they stand out and people ask them, they want to take pictures and so on and so forth. And then they understand a little bit more about the Sikh culture, which was an amazing journey for me.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, yeah, I can just imagine you must all have had a very unique and enriched experience. I mean, your friends, your mom, and of course you included. And thanks for sharing some of these personal aspects of how you negotiated the various roles that you had to play, which some of us could only imagine how stressful that must have been for you, and also that you did this at a relatively young age to take on such a significant responsibility. But on that note, we do have a question from Jagdev, but I'm going to reserve that question for towards the end because we do want to hear a little bit more about your future plans. But going back to that little, that point about some of the challenges you encountered, it also makes me think a little bit about there's this sense that the diasporic Sikhs. That means Sikhs who are not who are now residing in various parts of the world. It seems to suggest, even your mom, as she was sharing, prior to the trip, that they had these imagined ideas of what Haruwal is in the case of your mom, or even for other diasporic Sikhs, what they think about, what they feel and imagine their village or ancestral roots, what those places would be like and whatnot. But do you get this sense that it's a largely and very romanticized aspect, but the true reality is that actually, being especially the most of Punjab is still agrarian, agriculture based, and the reality, the real day realities there are actually significantly harsh. So I'm just trying to understand, does this do people, therefore, even folks like your mom, do they realize actually that the daily realities are harsh, or do they then after a visit still come back feeling that, there's this sense of a missed opportunity? If I had stayed on, things would have been very different for me. Would you tell us a little bit about, that sort of tension that people possibly encounter?
Yes. So this is a very important question. I asked my mom as well. So in one of the interviews, but it didn't fit right in the story. So I asked my mom. Is basically she heard about all these stories, and now I brought her there, and she was deep in the discussion. So she was having that, she always wants to go back and visit, and she wants to see the place. Now she understands it, and then this is the big question where I asked her. So would you want to stay here now? So given that you're born in India and now you'll be staying in Singapore all your life, and then in this one visit. So this is where she understood that I don't think I can stay here, because mainly partially for the health wise, and the day-to-day activities is totally different back home. So in Singapore and in India. So understanding that, but the idea to know that this is something where I can be and I would want to go visit on a yearly basis, that's a more important factor. But to actually stay there is a whole different question altogether. So that's why this was a very good question when I asked her. It was very deep and raw, and then straight away when I asked her to that question, she reflected. She took a while, and then she said, yes, this is where I want to be, but my home is Singapore.
Wow.
So that answered the question of identity. So I put her in that spot where you say you are this and you're also this, but understanding both, so that helped her in that process.
Just going to push this a little further. So that means there are obviously some practical concerns and considerations, but eventually your mom said she's Singaporean, right? Is that what you implied?
Yes,
so that means you're saying emotionally and practical considerations wise, she would just prefer Singapore, or actually practical considerations, Singapore is ideal, but emotionally the connection is still to India? I'm just curious if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so for that, it actually practically obviously would be Singapore, because on the day-to-day and how everything is fixed, will be in Singapore. But on emotionally, because now she understands even better, she would still be in Singapore, but there is the off days where she would like to go back to India. So there's that back and forth. Now understanding it better, she knows when to pull and push that particular emotion that she had.
I mean, so in some ways, she's not one or the other. She's in fact both, right? She is, of course, from Haruwal and from Singapore. And some days more Haruwal, some days more Singapore.
Exactly.
But I thought, Jeevan, I mean, I thought to ask you a little further. I mean, another very poignant sort of frame or part of the film, I noticed, your mom was sitting down and asking the current occupants of the home, right, about whether they had any stories of Haruwal. And I don't know about you, but there was actually a moment where, when they replied and said, no, they're not, because they only moved relatively recently and they're from another place, right? And I could really feel her disappointment and upset at that point. So I'm just trying to, understand as well, share a little bit about, I mean, I'm sure your mom and you probably had a conversation about that. And she articulated a little bit about, okay, land gone. She later just said, but she still said later, this is Haruwal, man. So you could see that joy came back. But share a little bit about, what your mom exactly felt in that space when she was talking to the current occupants. And then later, of course, what were some of the exchange that you had with her?
Right. So for that particular scene, when we are tasked to film, I made the choice to, because once we are at the area, we had to continual film it, and I cannot ask for permission. So imagine this is when we are outside the house and we are asking the people, so which is the house? Okay, then this is a very one, and I cannot go in, introduce myself, ask for permission, and then come out. So I just had the camera to roll. So imagine the situation where my mom, she is standing right here, and I was filming. Like I got the cinematographers to be filming at the back to record her response. And when we are in, when they saw us filming, they got scared. The house owners, because they assume that we are trying to take back the house, but we are just trying to get information. So throughout the whole process, they keep asking, so you're from Singapore and what you trying to do here? What's with the camera? But obviously I got the permission eventually, but they were worried about that. So my mom, I had to push her in the way where for that discussion, she only wants to find out if this is the house and what other stories we have. So this was my Uncle G, he was there with her to ask those questions. And each time whenever she asked any questions about the house, about the land, generally about Haruwal, she got shut down. So because we found out that this house was taken over by another occupant. So basically they have zero information about it. So even my mom was trying to push, have you seen those people there? What was it? Was it this? Was that? Every time when she asked, it was just basically shut down. So filming that sequence was very difficult. I had a difficult task to continue filming, because knowing is for the story, but I need to get those cinematic information on screen, and I also need to ask for permission at the same time. So that was my big discussion before going in. So obviously I knew how uncomfortable the family members were, but I had to reassure them for every now and then. They say they're fine, but then there's a back and forth. So what is he about? What are they trying to take the land? But we have to prove that we're not. So I would understand the fear. So there's the whole discussion about and finding out about the house and also filming that whole sequence.
Yeah, fast. I mean, so it's interesting, right? There's so much going on. There's a little bit about there's some suspicion with each other, but at the same time, you're also negotiating an arrangement where you're able to film and trying to assure them. But yeah, again, so many challenges, but you've done a wonderful job. And I'm going to switch to a slightly different tack right now. But again, once again, I'd like to invite our viewers at home to submit your questions. I know Jagdev probably is just waiting for me to get to his question. Jagdev, I assure you, your question will be answered by Gurjeevan, but I would like to reserve that. It's something that we also want to know a little bit more about what Gurjeevan's future plans are. But meanwhile, we have a time for just about maybe 3 more questions. So I invite you again, viewers at home. But I want to ask you, Gurjeevan, in both themes, Come Here and in Haruwal, very significantly, one significant aspect of these are grandparents, right? The role of grandparents. Is there a particular reason for this? Is there a particular decision that you made to have this aspect of grandparents being developed as either figures or as a part of the themes that you are hoping to explore?
Yes, because mainly all the idea stories noted from our grandparents. So given that I've never met my grandfather, he passed on at a very young age. So I had the luxury to be close to my grandmother and hear stories on a daily basis. So what is what? One's in India and so on and so forth. So the general use of grandparents is a key in order for our future generations to understand more about the culture and the story and the religion, all about it back in India. So this is relates whenever I speak to all my friends, about the grandparents. Some they don't speak, some they have never met. So I had the luxury of having my grandmother with me, to share those stories. So I needed to use those elements to bring up the story. So having a Singaporean Sikh to tell just on our day-to-day stories, it doesn't have any strong point to keep to. So we always need to go back to the past. So that is why most of my stories, it relates to somewhere in the past, and also blends of the current generation at the same time.
Really nice. I mean, yes, I think you couldn't have said it better. Where our grandparents, they are windows to the past, and it's a real privilege to be able to have that access, right? Where they're able to share their experiences and accounts. We have time for maybe just another quick question. Let's see. Okay, maybe this would be the last question, and that privilege will go to, of course, Jagdev, but I'll also take some liberty to elaborate a little bit about his question. So Jagdev has asked, Gurjeevan, what do you think are some of the other good stories about Sikhs in Singapore that have not been told? So what are possible stories, either filmmakers like yourself or other filmmakers would be able to develop? And I have a slightly related question to that. Do you think, I mean, that being, of course, obviously a Sikh filmmaker, this is, of course, a cultural capital that you develop, right? Where you are talking about our community. Would it be easy for someone not from the Sikh community, you think, to develop a film or work on a film of this nature?
Okay, so to answer the first question relating to about the stories here, whether is it good? So I got to say, definitely the one that Upneet have done is about Bhai Maharaj Singh. So that is some a little story that all of us have heard, but we've never actually seen. So watching her documentary has actually put on screen what it represents, who he was, and everything relates to the past, where we can take this information and understand and move forward. So there are many strong stories that has not been told. So there are particular about the religious story we cannot tell, and also for different reasons. But I would want to tell relating to Singapore, the Singapore notation to India, because there are many stories relate to how the Indians in America, the Indians in Canada, Indians in Australia, but there isn't much stories about Sikhs in Singapore or in Asia. So that is my biggest push, and I see this little gap. This is where I'm gonna make more stories about this area, and also more information. What is it like being a Singaporean Sikh? So male or female, these are the stories that I'm going to be pushing forward to make.
But what really is the difference? I mean, so we have diasporic communities around the world, like you said. There are films about Sikhs in other parts of the world, and you've rightly pointed out there aren't that many films about Sikhs in Singapore. But really, what is something that you feel is unique and different, and which definitely should be shared through film?
Because the experience is also different. So growing up in like America, they're more free, they're more liberal, whereas Singapore is slightly different to other countries. So the stories that they tell, it may be more free, and the experience would be similar, but the experience is different. Because growing up in Singapore, there's you need to explain more of the different religion and the different races. Whereas for other countries, it's just one particular race or two races. And then in general, you're always the outsider. So for being the outsider in Singapore specifically, there are 4 other races that you need to share about. So that is where my big goal is to explain, being that there are Sikhs living in Singapore with different reaction, different experiences. So that's my main goal to make films about.
Nice. And of course, you have gotten some encouragement from Upneet, who is also, like me, probably looking forward to your future works, Gurjeevan. And with that, we are going to go to our final question for tonight, for this evening. Maybe it's a 2-part question. I mean, share with us, Jeevan. We're going almost right to the start with this, but really, your journey as a filmmaker. Just share with us, in the first instance, what got you started. Where you are currently, obviously, sharing with us about some of the works that you have already done, and maybe a little bit about the future you envision for yourself. I mean, what kinds of issues really will you be taking head on when it comes to the films that you want to make? So it's a 3-part question, okay? Your journey as a filmmaker, what got you started, where you are currently and what's the future you envision for yourself if you are going to continue with film? What are some of the issues that we are able to look forward to see?
Okay. I'll start with the beginning, why I started in the first place. So for me, it started when I watched a Disney film, Mulan. So this is at that time where you see all the stories about fairy Disney princess, but particularly to Mulan is I've never experienced before, where a Chinese warrior going out and like saving China. So that is something that really resonated well with me watching the story back then. So as I grew up, I realized I I I I have this nature to bring people together by telling stories. So I was never good at telling them physically, but I'm good at taking a picture and then to put it on screen. So that was how it all started. And then when I'm understanding more about the culture, so everything relates to how Mulan is. So everything relates to the cultural aspect, the family, and how she needs to save her family from disgrace or whatever the case. So it relates to any Asian stories. And then within that, I'm telling it from the Sikh perspective uh, point of view. So that is why I there isn't anybody to do that at the time. So given that I had this information, I had this calling of sorts, and that is why I decided to go on this journey. So on this journey, you can tell is extremely difficult because there aren't any actors out there that I can use. So every storytelling element that I'm using is basically my aunt or my cousin or a friend that I know about. Is I need to understand the ways to work with non-actors just to get them comfortable in that particular role. What I'm trying to say. Sometimes it could be a bad story, sometimes it could be a good story. So that is the difficult aspect of it, but it's not it's gonna take me away. So this is what I actually look forward to. I look forward to challenges that it brings me forward. So that is why there are many stories that needs to be told. I'm in the works of it. In my biggest film to date, which I can't actually show it today, it's Bichora. It's basically the story about India's partition. So in a very short story, short brief is I managed to went to India. I had a whole journey. I went to like 7 different states. I interviewed people from Sikhs, Hindu, Muslim, whatsoever. I got the understanding from the grandparents understanding what partition was on the ground, and I put it on screen. And I also got to recreate some like the children were being attacked in various alleys. So to build that, it was my best work so far, and that's the one that I'm going to be sending to various festivals and so and so. So in the future, what I really want on a yearly basis, I'll be making one or two short films. So it will relate to Singaporean perspective six, and also all will be a historical point. So like next year, I really want to do a story about a feature film idea that I have, but to build on that, I would want to make a theatrical play on it. So this is what my big exploration goal for next year. Subsequently, the themes and all the different elements that what I want to tackle is it's all relating to Sikh culture, Singapore, India. So this the bubble that I'm grown with, and I have this luxury of going to India and finding people, and if I need a certain scene, I can go to India, and for the lack of a better word, it's cheaper. I can bring a crew there. So I have this luxury, so I'm going to make use of it and make more films so that for all our future generations, they can understand it, especially when someone who sees it on screen, they can visualize and understand it better rather than just a storytelling aspect. So this is what I'm going to push forward for the years to come.
Thanks for that, Gurjeevan. Yeah, in a way, you're building some resources, although these are in a way they're creative pieces of work, but they are also very useful resources, not only for within the community, but even others to understand a little bit about Sikhs and of course Sikhs in Singapore. And it's also really so inspiring to hear, some of your aspirations of bringing together even some different forms of arts, where there's theater and then also having some film dimension being developed or some synergies there as well, right? I know I said that was the last question, but I'm going to ask you one more simply because I can. But Gurjeevan, really, I want to end on this note of, what would be some of your advice for, other aspiring young filmmakers, whether they are Sikh or non-Sikh filmmakers, but filmmakers in Singapore. What would be one key advice that you would have for them in terms of, their journey as filmmakers?
In general, I would say is to fail fast, because a lot of people have ideas to make a particular video or particular idea, story or whatsoever, right? But when they get the idea of making it, they don't know how to put it on screen. And then when they put it on screen, they don't know how the audience would react. So by just making it, and you don't need to, in the very beginning stage, don't need to cost so much. You just make something with your phone or with a camera, a very simple 1 minute. And once you can master that, and then you move on to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then it goes on longer and longer. So that is my one mistake to my advice to any Sikh filmmaker or anybody out there is to make mistakes fast and move on from them. Don't always look back and what I can change on that particular story. You fail, you learn, move on to the next story, move on to the next project. So you're always going to learn from every particular mistake, and then you apply it to the next one.
I think that's wonderful and really sound advice, to experiment and tinker with things as you go along and to learn from them. And it's also a wonderful way to end our session today. Thank you so much, Gurjeevan, and of course, the Indian Heritage Center for providing us this opportunity and platform to watch your wonderful films and get the chance to speak with you, gain insights and hear from you. Thank you so much, and on behalf of everyone, all viewers, once again, thanks to Gurjeevan and of course the Indian Heritage Center for the opportunity to moderate this discussion with Gurjeevan. Over to you, Malvika.
Thank you so much, Gurjeevan and Sean, for being with us this evening and for really bringing us through a fascinating discussion into sort of, the mind of the filmmaker, really, for the two wonderful short stories that we viewed today. And really, just talking about what went on in the background of the production of the two films, as well as the aspirations for the future. And I, for one, can't wait to see what's next, and particularly Vichora, that's going to a film festival soon. I hope it will be available for public viewing soon as well. And of course, Sean, for always kindly making time for us and being a wonderful moderator and really carrying this discussion forward. So I'd like to thank our audience who stuck around with us on a Saturday evening as well. Thank you all for being here. As this is a monthly series that will run until September in conjunction with our ongoing special exhibition, Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. Do watch out for the remaining 2 sessions that will happen in August and September as well. You can follow us on our Facebook and PTX pages for more information, or do write in to us if you'd like any further info as well. Thank you so much for being here again, and have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.